Welcome to TechTrends. TechTrends is a podcast series that provides perspective on the latest trends in technology, fintech, and digital. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what it means to be a data-driven business and how data can help you to grow and retain business. I'm Manish Bhamani, Chief Product Officer for Commercial Banking, and joining me today is Steve Turk, Chief Data Officer for Commercial Banking here at JPMorgan Chase. Steve, welcome to TechTrends.
Happy to be here, Manish.
So Steve, data is at the core of any successful business, right? It enables informed decisions, enhances business performance, streamlines operations, strengthens customer relationships. What are the key components to building a data-driven business?
First of all, let's talk about what data means. Data literally means all data, whether it's structured data that sits in relational databases, unstructured data, for instance, output from your operating systems, data generated from the public outside of your firm, machine learning models, all of it. When we talk about data, our strategy needs to incorporate data from everywhere. The second piece is really a cultural change. When you think about data historically, there's been data experts who knit together information from systems and put it into a data warehouse. We call that data as exhaust because data is really a secondary function from the core underlying business. Where we want to go is data as fuel. So all of the systems that we bring data into a central place, normalize it, use that information to not only represent to individuals a single version of truth, but also to generate valuable insights about where the business is going, because we now have data and the context in one place. To do this really requires a top-down direction from the executive team and a commitment to move to a world in which all decisions are made supported by data, and the results of those decisions are then reported on as well using data. The second piece is that it's a multi-year commitment. This stuff does not happen overnight. You don't go from multiple data warehouses to a single data-driven business in 30 days. This is a multi-year effort that requires continuous executive support and investment. And the final piece is with that data team, making sure that they're always looking 2-3 years down the road at what the emerging technologies are that can solve some of the data problems that they're encountering today. As an example, when we started on this process many years ago, some of the capabilities that we're now incorporating, things that are enabled by the public cloud, weren't available to us in year one, but we structured our strategy so that when technologies became available, we could then fold them into our overall strategy and improve our data-driven capabilities.
I love that analogy of data as exhaust versus data as fuel. Can you explain that a little bit better? What do you mean by companies treating data as exhaust?
Well, if you look around, historically, if you looked around a typical organization or enterprise, data sits in a couple of places. First of all, it sits in applications. So applications that are used, for instance, sales or to provide customer service or to keep track of financial reporting. Those systems house their data in data islands, and they help perform an individual function. But what they don't do is, because they're in islands, they don't build in a central way a knowledge set that can be used to not only better understand how the business is working today, but also to become much more predictive and where the business can go in the future. So we use we call that first situation in which data is in different systems and it's brought in secondarily to a single data warehouse to understand kind of what's been going on historically. We call that exhaust. What we mean from a data to fuel the business is we bring together information in a consistent way, but we also use that same information in those same applications so people using those applications can make better decisions, using all the data available within our organization.
Got it. So are you saying basically that you take data from different places, you bring it all together, you normalize it, you correlate it, and then you're able to sort of see patterns when you put all that data together that you wouldn't otherwise see if they're sitting in those islands or those individual databases or things? Is that it?
That's it. And a couple great things happen when you bring that data together to see patterns. First of all, those patterns enable people to think about what else can we do with this data now that it's all put together. So you get innovation out of pulling together a much more fulsome view of what the data in the business looks like. The second is it becomes fuel for all the advanced data capabilities that you hear about, in the business, in the business publications, how to use machine learning and how to use AI to become much more predictive about where the business is going.
So let's talk about some of that technology as well, right? Technology is rapidly changing, keeps getting better, right? You mentioned data warehouses. We've been talking for the last couple of years about data lakes. Increasingly now you hear about lake houses and things like this as well. What trends and technologies do you see emerging in the data space?
Well, I think trends in technologies in the data space, it's a constant subject area. The lakehouse terminology is a relatively new one, at least within the enterprise. A couple years ago, people would talk about data lakes and they would talk about data warehouses, and they wouldn't consider them part of the same subject area. To me, what a lakehouse structure means is that becoming much more of I'm going to call it almost a factory type of approach to bringing data together, to normalize interpreting it, and then using that as fuel for insights to drive the business going forward.
Well, you talked about machine learning. We've done a couple episodes on machine learning, and it's all the rage. I've said for the last couple of years, nobody knows what the question is, but the answer is definitely machine learning around that as well. And but you've also been very vocal that, hey, before you get to really take advantage of machine learning algorithms and models and artificial intelligence and things like that, there's a lot of work to be done on the data foundation and getting your data ready. And you don't really earn the right to do machine learning until you get your data in a form that you can take full advantage of it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so to that point, Anish, data moving from data architecture to data enablement through AI ML, it is a journey. It does not happen all overnight. And if other organizations are like our own, initially people leapt feet first into let's start solving problems using these fancy machine learning techniques, and we were able to answer questions, a one-time question, but we were not. What was difficult was getting adoption of those models across the firm. For a couple of different reasons. Number one, it was difficult to get the actual model output to end users to use. But second of all, which is probably most important, is we found that individual machine learning initiatives, each were having to solve exactly the same thing. They were having to solve the context of the problem. They were having to solve the data wrangling, bringing the data together in a central place. They were also having to figure out how to get to an audience. So what we did is say, if you look at that problem, that to get to higher order machine learning type algorithms in the business, what we really needed to do is build a very strong foundation, and the foundation is bringing together information in a consistent way with a consistent context, so that as we use data to drive our machine learning models, the context was reusable, and those models began to complement each other across use case by use case. So that idea of a foundation for context to then earn the right to be able to start building machine learning algorithms that were complementary was a big breakthrough moment for us. The final piece is that that last mile, getting the right information and the right algorithm output to the right person, is a very difficult one. We had to build that capability of a channel to get our audience not only that first insight, but also all the other insights that we could offer against a given client or a given business process. So solving the foundational piece and solving the ability to get distribution in a consistent way for our machine learning insights was a key part of our journey. That sequence, to kind of go back to Anish, your original question, the sequence and the order of doing things is very, very important if you're going to achieve scale in your data initiatives.
So I heard a couple of very important points in there. Number one is, people have a tendency to jump feet first into machine learning just because it is this hot new thing that everybody wants to go into, but to really build a repeatable, evergreen process, you got to spend the time on that data foundation. You got to get to the point where the data and the models are both in the same environment, and you can learn and train on data and other things like that. I heard that once you have models in that sort of evergreen a process or things like that, they can start building up on top of each other, and you get sort of an exponential network effect, if you will, where each model learns from the last, or the things like that. And the third thing, which I think is an important one that people don't always think about, is like, yeah, you can build all the models, but unless you can distribute the insights from those models in context, how people consume things in their day-to-day work life, or other things like that, it's not going to have the same value. Did I get that right?
You got it exactly right, Anish. And I think the most important thing, and we're starting to see, is that the experience you learn by working in that sequence not only compounds itself in terms of the models that you're able to do, but you build muscle memory in the organization for the right way to do things. So the time to value for that next insight is reduced as you, the more experience you get working within, call it a common data platform data set, as well as known available distribution channels to get to the end users.
So many corporations, and we're no different here at JPMorgan Chase, are in the process of a large digital transformation. And a big part of that is modernization of the technology stack, the technology environment, moving to public cloud and leveraging microservices architectures and building autonomous systems. How do you, with all that as background, how do you deliver more value through data in that kind of an environment?
So I think that, first of all, the cloud itself is the single biggest enabler that I've seen within financial services in my 20-year career. And when I say that, it's because it benefits in multiple ways how we think about the business. So first of all, clearly cloud and microservices architecture and all the great things from a technology perspective mean the cost of ownership of technology, you get efficiencies in that place. And we've certainly seen that in our firm, and you hear about that. I mean, that's a major reason for the growth in cloud adoption across enterprises and businesses of all sizes. But when we go back to the original point, how do you build a data-driven business? A key part of the data-driven business is to build is to get everybody operating off the same set of facts, and also to continue to extend the ability to add new facts and new insights in a way that accelerates the capabilities of a business. What the cloud allows us to do is the architecture of cloud, if you think about how to move data assets and how you can perform certain value-added services, including machine learning, in the cloud, you get the economies of scale, you get the consistency, you get the ability to incorporate new capabilities and new technologies from a road mapping perspective all in one place, versus having to manage that across multiple different data environments and data warehouses. So truly a breakthrough in terms of not only efficiency, but the ability to create compounding knowledge and value.
Yeah, so we're obviously a very big place. We get a lot of benefit from moving to the public cloud. How else do we optimize data to deliver greater value to our customers and to our business in a global firm the size of JPMorgan Chase?
So the idea of creating a central data dictionary, the idea to come up with a common set of ways to calculate certain measures or certain attributes, and making that information available in a consistent, traceable way throughout the enterprise is a huge enabler, because now you don't have to have as many subject matter experts around the firm who know how those old systems work. You can continue to use those systems, but convert them to a normalized language that people throughout the firm can now collaborate using the same set of facts. It takes a lot of, I'm going to call it elbow grease and rolling up your sleeves. But once you get to that normalized data set and an agreed to common set of definitions, that's where you really get the, I'd say, the foundation to accelerate your higher value add ML and AI capabilities on top of that same set of facts.
Yeah, and just to drive that point home, I mean, that's a lot of the data cleanup stuff we were talking about before, right? So you might look at one system and they reference state as a two-digit or two-character state, and another system over here they reference state with the full name, and you can't correlate things together. So to what you said before about data lakes and lake houses, to be able to bring all this data together, that normalization is hugely important, right? I heard somebody describe it once as, in the absence of that, you spend your whole life doing what they call archaeology, right? Which is just getting into where does this data come from and how did I get it? And it's a massive amount of work, but it's really, really crucial and foundational to getting the value out of this, right?
Yeah, and I'd say it's from a scalability perspective. When you think about what we're trying to achieve in our called foundational data platform, what we tried to do is find all of those processes that were being done either manually or differently across the enterprise and come up with a single way to do them so that we could scale that and free up resources to do value add across the enterprise. And so that's really, it's not something that happens overnight. In fact, it's something that we continue to work on. But the benefits you get not only from an efficiency standpoint and ability to do higher order analytics, but also having the firm work in much more of a networked way, being able to communicate across organizations and across functions. You can't underestimate the value of that.
Yeah, and it also feels like something that you're never done doing, right? You have to have that evergreen process, and always, there's a lot of care and feeding of the environment around this as well. So we talked about how we deal with something at a large global firm. Let's look at the other side of that. What about smaller firms? A lot of our clients, a lot of our listeners may not have the same resources of a JPMorgan Chase. What advice would you give them for handling the growing demands of data management?
Get an understanding of what is happening today in your firm around data. If your firm, and I think one thing that's common across smaller size firms as well as enterprises is that there's people in your firm that are doing your data work. There may be more than one of them, and they are some of the most valuable people in your firm for helping senior management and helping the organization work today. Find out who those people are, get them together, and have them come to you and say, if we can only do this, we can solve these problems and make our company work better. So data is, it tends to be stored in systems we're all familiar with. But in the new world, and I bet my experience is talking to the experts, moving that island data structure, which data is stored in multiple places, to a more unified structure, enabled by, for instance, moving information to the public cloud, opens up a world opportunity and also helps de-risk your operations, because some of those people that know actually how where the data comes from that helps make decisions today, what you're able to do is convert what they're doing today into something that is much more automated. And also the ability to control that information, both from a risk standpoint as well as a privacy standpoint, you get the benefits of that too. So it's really about elevating the people that work with your data today, listening to them and helping them build that data-driven future for your company. And I think you'll see benefits not only from an efficiency standpoint, but also from a data risk and addressing some of the privacy regulation, which we know will continue to come, a much more stable and ability to extend that environment.
Yeah, I think one thing to add to that as well, as you mentioned, the concept of data dictionaries. And I think, there's the old story, about a decade ago, we were talking to somebody and said, hey, where do we keep all of this data? And the answer, of course, is yes. Right? Because there's copies of things all over the place. And I think one of the most important things that you've done and the team has done is define what are all those data elements, and then what is the definitive system of record that is, this is the one true copy or the one true source of all of that data that everybody should get it from. And then, because otherwise, inevitably, at any firm of any size, you have somebody and they go into a database and they make a copy of the data and it goes over here, or they manipulate a little bit. And next thing you know, you got 8 copies of the same set of data, all of which are just a little bit different. So I think that data dictionary work, that system of record work, and that traceability, as you said, is super important.
Investing in a data dictionary, and also, this is really important, not worrying about perfection, because using best data in a consistent way is going to get you along that journey, and also point you to areas in which, hey, we need data better here. Let's invest in getting better data so that we can continue to build our data-driven capability. It's only in getting to that kind of strategy in which there's a commitment to build that single version of the truth of the data dictionary, and always looking for the best source of information, the best data, and being able to augment what you've built. That's how you move from what I'd say almost a data archipelago approach, in which data exists in multiple places, to a data-driven business using the same set of facts.
Yeah, I love that as well. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Start, and then you keep iterating, and it gets better as you go, right? So, Steve, it's impossible to have a conversation around data without also talking about privacy and security, right? Data, especially customer data, can be very sensitive. We have the same issue with what we call MNPI, material non-public information, that has to be handled with care. And there's lots of regulatory requirements and controls required, and handling procedures and things like that. What are some of the biggest security and privacy challenges that companies face around data, and what do we do to address it?
Security and privacy are incredibly important now, and they're going to continue to be important in the future. So starting the process of understanding how to reduce your risk around data is really important. We're not going to talk about the cyber risk, those bad actors that are trying to break into your company, but rather let's talk about internally things that you can do to protect your data, and also make sure you're keeping in line with the ever-growing regulation around data, in particular privacy. The first step is to understand where your data is. If you're like most enterprises, I think small companies are in the same way. A lot of very important data is in spreadsheets that are spread around various data stores, local hard drives, shared drives around the firm, collaborative tools. There's information that's stored in collaborative tools, and that if you look into this, the protection schemes, if there are any, are pretty rudimentary. So we really have to take a step back and say, okay, we have to protect our data. And if people are moving things into these local data stores, and that we know where those are, we're putting adequate controls around that information and where they're stored. The second piece is that if we are bringing our data, out from things like data warehouses that individuals can access and pull information from, what we really need to know is what's in those data warehouses, and be able to segregate data by data risk. Personal information, things like individual names and social security numbers, et cetera. The highest risk information, it's really what the privacy regulation is all about. How do we protect that information and not use it in ways that are detrimental to the individual? Segregating that information and knowing where it's at, and limiting access to what we call PI, personal information, is critically important. The second is, if there's information that is confidential, either from a company standpoint, agreements that they may have with your company, or from a internal operations perspective, segregating that and knowing where it's located, and making sure that only the right people have access to that information. And then finally, there is data out there that is not risky, and may be important from a data-driven standpoint, to make sure that your firm can continue to grow and operate using things like single version of truth. Understanding what the relative risk is of information, and building the appropriate controls, and also enabling individuals to operate off of call that non-risky or less risky information, is also very important. And one of the things that we discovered around less sensitive information that can be used as fuel for the firm. Public information, if information is available publicly, and if your company's, if that's a key part of, for instance, sales and marketing efforts, no sense in making that information under lock and key. Make sure that as many people can use that information as possible, especially if they love data, because new insights, new capabilities can come out of that information that can help your overall operation. So it's really about democratizing data in a way that is also highly controlled to who the people are and how they use the information. In summary, making sure you know where your data is at and building controls around it. If you do have a data warehouse or building a data, lake data platform, making sure you protect your the riskiest, most sensitive data, personal information, what the company considers to be confidential information, and understand who's accessing that information and how they can use that information. And then finally, if there is low risk information that would help your business run better, making that much more available to individuals so that people are not only working off the same version of the truth, but also can develop innovations off that information.
Right. Okay. Finally, Steve, I'm going to ask you to get your crystal ball out, right? So if you look forward 3 to 5 years down the road, what do you see emerging trends in data and data science, right? What's going to be in the headlines?
Well, it's a great question, Kanish, because I think going back to where we started, one of the key parts of being data-driven is trying to predict where the world could go based on elements of, based on data problems that we face today. One of the data problems that we face, and I think in this enterprise, but I think across companies all sizes, is that there are some, what I'd say, repeatable machine learning tasks, whether it be trying to extract using NLP techniques, trying to extract information from documents or information from things like voice or even from video or pictures. That takes a heavy investment in machine learning specialists to extract that value. I think 3 to 5 years from now, that is going to be a commodity that we will be able to buy. We'll be able to buy services at a very economical price that will interpret all of this information and extract the information from documents, from pictures, from videos that today takes a heavy investment internally. The second piece is, I think that the idea that data is one way, that you take a platform that brings together information, developing insights, and then pushes it out to individual users. I think that the individual users of that information are going to become the most important data source. So not only that it's not a one-way communication, but when we push information to individuals, what they do with that information, how they respond to it, how they improve upon that information, what are the business results, those that feedback loop will become much more real time. Today, it's, we do get feedback loops, but it's a very arduous process to bring that information back and say, what does it mean? How should we change models? I think that the ability to continually improve models based on individual user interactions in near real time is something that we certainly expect to happen. But it requires thinking about what's the right architecture now to enable that to happen. So really and I think that the capabilities around AI and ML and being predictive and automate will only continue to get better. And so those things that really get us to more real-time insights, more real-time feedback, more ability to understand the intent and interpret any type of data stored, whether it be documents, voice, email, video, pictures, those things are going to be part and parcel to how a data-driven organization works 3 to 5 years from now.
It's fascinating. So let's see. We'll keep looking at the crystal ball and see how many of those things come true going forward. Steve, thanks very much for joining us and providing your insights on this fascinating topic.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.
And to all of our listeners, remember, if you like this episode, you can subscribe and rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thanks for joining.